Well, it's mid-June, and the temperatures have been pretty mild so far this year, 2025. But the forecast shows that it's about to crank up the heat into the 90s, approaching 100 Fahrenheit, of course. And so that means it's going to become basically impossible to do much work out here in the evergreen collection until fall rolls around and the temperatures become more manageable. But I thought it'd be a good idea to take a quick look at the growing progress so far this year. Obviously, I have several different projects running at once in terms of planting new things and also ripping out the grass and putting down this rock mulch that you can see here, partially complete. So starting off with the Turnstoremia gymnanthera, that's called Clayera if you buy it at Lowe's. Made some good growth progress this year, and I think it might continue a little bit. You see those brown leaves there are all new growth. It looks a little bronze when it first comes out. And the Paul Select Norway spruce only ended up putting on about 3 inches of vertical growth this year. And the Korean spruce did about the same, maybe approaching 4. This silverberry shrub here, Elaeagnus pungens, has started to put on a lot more growth, and I do like the density of it. I'm going to continue to prune that to try to keep it relatively vertical and as tree-like as possible. And here in the foreground, the Chihuahuan spruce. This is Picea chihuahuana. The plan worked, essentially. It has formed a new leader after a couple seasons without a good leader, you can see there. And this foliage is already starting to harden off to its extremely spiky default status. And you can see that bluish color there of the Chihuahuan spruce, as a reminder, native to northwestern Mexico. But it's done very well here, even in cold temperatures. And then back here in the back I've got the swamp bay, that's actually red bay I believe, that is Persea borbonia, putting on some new growth. And then right here, gotta step back to show the full scope of this. The spruce here is the Lijiang spruce. I'm going to rotate so you can see contrasted. Native to southwestern China. Picea liqiangensis, once again, for the, I guess, maybe 5th or 6th year in a row. Fantastic growth. This looks to be about a foot and maybe a couple inches. So I'd estimate about 35 centimeters maybe on the main leader there. Good branching structure, and you can see that bluish colored foliage, almost as blue as the Arizona cypress in the background. And then just to let you know, the Arizona cypress trees continue to put on some growth at the top, but their rate of growth has slowed down a lot. And then over here, a little hard to see because they're silhouetted, but the very tallest there is Thuja green giant. And behind the Arizona cypress, the leyland cypress trees continue to die from the bottom to the top, but I'm going to probably leave them in all summer long and start to remove that and replant that area in September, or most likely October, even before it gets cool enough to do that. In this little section here, there are a couple of Vanderwolf pyramid pines, and then you can see tucked in there the Dahoon holly, which is making great progress. And here you can kind of get an idea of how big of a hole the loss of the leyland cypress will kind of blow in my privacy screen here. All of this is going to come out in the background, and you can see here in the foreground I've got some magnolias that are actually healed in pots now, but we're going to help fill that gap, among other things. Looking at this section here, it's fairly dense. There's the Dragon Lady holly, has put on some good growth, and tucked in there behind that, the incense cedar, Calicedrus decurrens, is trying to grow as much vertical as possible. Oakland holly here in the foreground, and behind that a nice blue atlas cedar, doing very well. And then here we have Foster holly right in the middle, and there's a Christmas jewel holly, and then there is the Japanese umbrella pine, and behind that we have the loquat, which looks like it started to put on some lateral branches, but still most of the growth is vertical. I have it here in a relatively protected spot because I'm not entirely sure what its cold hardiness capabilities are. And behind that, the this broadleaf evergreen here, center screen, is the Carolina laurel, Prunus caroliniana. You can see peeking out to the left of that the tops of the spruce pine, Pinus glabra. And then I'm going to have to back up to show you the full scale of the Nico fir, Abies homolepis. And notice the very top there, a nice vertical leader for the first time in a couple years since it lost the leader. I think it lost it during the deep freeze of 2022. So 23 and 24 kind of grew sideways a little bit, and 25 has reestablished pretty large vertical leader that looks to be over 1 foot or over 30 centimeters long. So that's encouraging for the long-term vertical growth of the Nico fir. I'll give you a close-up of the foliage on that. Extremely similar to Momi fir, Abies firma, even down to the double-tipped needles. I think you can see that there are 2 tips on the needle, and the Momi fir has that as well. They are very closely related. This is a pretty well established Picea purpurea here, Yunnan spruce, a little bit of dieback on some of the foliage. And this is the Steeds cultivar of Ilex crenata, Japanese holly. This right here in the middle is the Nordmann fir, Abies nordmanniana. And my little, this is the Red Star cultivar of Atlantic white cedar, Chamaecyparis thyoides. Still doing pretty good, growing vertical, mostly conical, but it is a dwarf, so not too much expected. And then this is the Momi fir I mentioned earlier. I was going to let you see the double-tipped needle. If I can find a good example. A little hard to see. Okay, there, I think you can see center screen there, the double-tipped needle. Kind of hard to focus it, but it is double-tipped. I may have to take my word for it. And then stepping back to show how the top looks, I think my selective pruning that I did earlier in the spring was a success. There are 2 good leader candidates. The one on the right looks best of all. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens next spring as far as bud break and late frost. In the back here we have Savannah holly doing very well. And behind that the row of Norway spruce, which put on a lot of growth this year. At least a foot vertical in almost every case. And then this is a incense cedar here that's just starting to grow. It's going to grow all summer long. Here's another Dahun holly, Ilex cassine, in front of some Thuja occidentalis nigra, which has gotten pretty tall and big this year. There's a venerable pyramid, and behind that, loblolly pine continuing to push vertical. This is the Osmanthus heterophylla sasaba cultivar. Put on a little bit of growth, fairly slow growing. And this Virginia pine, Pinus virginiana, continues to put on nice growth and has really good form actually. Let me back up and try to show the whole tree there. Nice and dense, even some natural layering there. I did not trim it to look like that, so pretty cool tree, native to Tennessee. And here are a couple oriental spruces here. These are the Atrovirens cultivar of oriental spruce, Picea orientalis. And this is the pitch pine here, Pinus rigida, which I had to trim a little to keep my pathway open. And here we have the Picea omorica, that's Serbian spruce. A close-up of that Picea omorica and the somewhat twisted leader here. Don't really know what caused that. Here's a view of some of the deodar cedars. This is the Carl Fuchs cultivar, getting very large, and you can see that layering starting to form on the foliage. There's one way up there, super tall at this point. I would say, man, maybe approaching 30 feet. Maybe more like 25 feet. And this is the Sweet Bay magnolia here, Magnolia virginiana. Kind of growing tucked in here behind the loblollies, which is just where it likes to be. Partial sun, partial shade. Getting pretty dense. And there's an Ilex glabra densa cultivar there. And the little Japanese white pine, Pinus parviflora glauca cultivar. Didn't do too much this year, fairly slow growing. Right next to that I have the Elysium floridanum, which is really starting to bush out a lot. And then here's another Magnolia virginiana, sweet bay magnolia, getting very tall. Sometimes I forget to show this tree. This is the red spruce, Picea rubens, and it looks like I did suffer some leader dieback here for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm hopeful that it will come back eventually. It's in a somewhat shady location here, but that should be okay for this tree that usually grows way up in the mountains of East Tennessee. And next to that, the Pieris japonica. This is the Dorothy Wyckoff cultivar. Here I really had to stake up the Vejar fir, Abies vejarii, because it does not yet have good vertical tendency. But the foliage color is pretty amazing. Those green stems underneath with the blue foliage on the outside. Pretty striking. And there's a bumper crop of cones on the Chemaecypris thyoides, Atlantic white cedar here. In this little area back here, I'm getting some good growth on the two types of southern magnolia I have planted here. One is the Edith Bogue. No, it's not. It's the D.D. Blanchard on the left, and on the right is the Little Gem, spelled G-E-M. And then right here in the foreground, I have two Burkii red cedars. You can see the bluish colored juniper looking tree there. It is a juniper, Juniperus virginiana, growing very rapidly. And next to that, the Asian thuja, Thuja orientalis. There you go. A couple cones on that one as well, looks like. And then this is a viburnum here, Prague viburnum, which I've also had to stake up to keep it from flopping over. I don't know if you can tell, but my Ocala anise here, Elysium parviflorum, a very good broadleaf evergreen, is leaning a little bit to the right, probably because it's being crowded by this leyland cypress here. And I'm definitely going to trim back that leyland and maybe stake up the Elysium to keep it more vertical, because the Elysium has a better prospect in the future than the leyland, which is really probably only a few growing seasons away from getting killed, same as the others. And there's one other unfortunate negative bit of news here. If you notice at the bottom, then there's a little dead foliage on this Thuja green giant here, and it's very hard to tell, but the Thuja green giant here center screen, the foliage is slightly off color, and I've kind of seen this happen before as a prelude to the ultimate death of some other Thujas I had, which after I excavated the stumps on all of those, I found buried roots that were not removed by the landscapers that planted those. This row of Thujas here in the background is one of the few sets of trees in my entire evergreen collection that were not planted by me, and they haven't had very good survival rates, so we'll see what happens with that. But other than that, everything else seems to be going pretty well, and I'm going to try to work on planting a couple more things before it gets insanely hot, but I may have to switch to just maybe only 30 minutes a day of work in early mornings for the next couple months, if anything, until fall rolls around. Lots of berries forming here on the pyracantha. That is the Yukon Bell pyracantha, very fast growing. And right there is the Kittileary Chinese juniper. You can see that drooping leader at the top there that will straighten out and be perfectly vertical as it matures.